face mask. This one here, this version has the nose bridge in it. This one here is without the nose bridge, but both have the filter pocket. So I'm going to walk you through the steps for making the mask with filter pocket. Now, if you follow along on the directions I've provided in your download, there's a section that says, note, follow the directions, eliminating all filter pocket steps if you do not want to add the filter pocket. So the mask can be made exactly the same way with or without the filter pocket. You decide what you want to do. I've gone ahead and I've cut all the pieces so you can see. And what I like to do is before I even go to my sewing machine, I like to have all of this prepped. Now, I went ahead and cut the non-woven interfacing as I indicate on the instructions, and you want to iron that on to the main fabric. Okay, but this is great if you're not going to add the filter pocket. It definitely provides some extra protection. But if you're going to do the filter pocket and you add this layer, the mask could get quite bulky and maybe not as comfortable as you like. When you download the PDF, you're going to get the 3 pieces that you need to make the mask. If you put them together at center front, you're going to see they're all different sizes, and there's a reason for that, and you're going to see as we move along in the steps. I'm going to put that aside for now and show you the rest here. We've got the 2 main pieces here, okay? We've got 2 lining pieces. What I want to show you here for your lining, for your prep, I'm not going to show you as I do it. I'm just going to point it out. I've pressed in 1/4 of an inch on the raw edge for the lining, and then I pressed in another 1/2 inch after that. You're just going to leave that. I just want you to create those press marks. On the filter pocket, you're going to iron in 1/2 inch from the raw edge, and then you're going to iron in another 1/2 inch. And then in this case, you're going to top stitch, okay, and prep those. I'm going to bring these to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew up the center fronts of each, and then I'm going to show you what the next step is after that. Okay, I'm back. I did my initial sewing. What I did is I put them right sides together and sewed the center front seam, and then when I was done sewing that, I secured these seam allowances by top stitching 1/4 of an inch on each side. So you want to go ahead and do that for all 3 pieces. In addition, on the pocket filter lining piece, you do want to top stitch those edges. You want to get nice and close to the edge, okay? And then again, on the lining piece, you've already pressed those edges in, you just want to leave those. Now what we're going to do is we're going to prep the inside of the mask. What you want to do is you're going to lay that filter pocket right side up on the right side of the liner. So go ahead and do that, and then you don't need to do a lot of pins, but 1 pin at the top, at the center, and 1 pin at the bottom, at the center. Okay, I'm going to move my camera over to the sewing machine and walk you through the next few steps. Okay, I'm back at the machine. What I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to baste these 2 together. So I want to lengthen my stitch all the way to 6. I'm just going to baste this right on the 1/4 inch. I just don't want these to shift while I'm sewing them to the main fabric. Okay, that's complete, and now this is 1 unit. This is the inside of your mask. We'll just call this the lining now. What I want to do is take the lining, and I'm going to pin this right sides together with the main fabric. Okay, here's the main fabric, here's the lining. center fronts together. I only pin the center fronts. I don't actually use pins when I sew. Not a lot anyway. Sometimes I do when I'm making a woven shirt or a woven skirt, but for the most part, I like to sew fast, so I feel like they get in the way and I don't want to have to keep pulling them every time I sew across them. And I'm always afraid I'm going to hit them. Okay, here we go. We're going to sew this together, right sides together, 5/8 inch, 2.5 millimeter stitch. When you begin sewing, you want to just, where we pressed in that lining, you want to just bring that back out. Okay, top is done. You do not want to trim your seam allowances at the top. And if you are going to trim seam allowances, it would be only the bottom, and I'll show you at what point you can do that. But for now, let's just keep those seam allowances. Okay, those are together. Now what we want to do is we're going to create the little casing tops. So what the casing tops are, if you look here, the elastic comes through the casing. You want to make sure all of that is nice and secure and looks good from the outside. So we're going to create those little casings. This is a rather tricky part of the mask, so you want to pay attention and follow those directions carefully. What you're going to do here is you're going to clip into the seam allowance about 1 inch from the raw edge of the main fabric. But when you clip into the seam allowance, you're going to flip that main portion down and away. And so what's exposed here is just the filter pocket or the lining, 1 unit now. And you're going to just clip into there around 1 inch in, and you're going to clip right up to that seam line. Be careful not to clip through the seam line. And then you're going to do that on all 4 corners. So pulling back that main piece, 1 inch in, and give that a clip. And now we're moving to the bottom. Again, pulling the main piece in and clip, and final one. Okay. Now you don't need to go to the ironing board, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be securing this top hem. Okay, so if I roll it down once, it's going to roll right on this seam line that you just created, the 5/8 seam line of the top. Now, if I fold that down, that's at 5/8. What I want to do is then roll it under one more time and make a cute little double hem. And again, you don't need to iron at this stage of the game. All you need to do is put a pin in there, and we're going to secure each of those. So the first one is done. Roll it down. You want to have it right up on that seam line. If it doesn't come down to the seam line, that means you didn't clip in far enough. So make sure you clip in far enough. And again, rolling down. I hope you can see this. I'm trying to do 2 things at once here. And pin it. And 1 more, 2 more. Okay, here's the final one. Okay, this next step is really important. Now you're going to secure those top hems. You're going to be sewing right along this bottom edge here, okay, to secure it. The important thing is when you sew it, you do not want to catch this main fabric. This is the main fabric from the wrong side. So you're only going to sew from the raw edge of the main fabric out. You want to do a quick tack in here to secure those stitches. I'm going to do all 4 of those now. Okay, one more. And that is done. Okay, make sure you didn't catch that main fabric. Just run your finger through. If you did, just pluck those stitches and secure it again. It all looks good. Now, remember I said don't trim your seam allowances? You're definitely not going to trim the top seam allowances. We're going to use those seam allowances as a buffer when we sew in our nose piece, okay? That nose grip I talked about earlier. Or I don't know if I talked about that. But anyway, we're going to secure that in there. Anyway, this is the only seam allowance that you could trim if you want. I don't bother. At this stage of the game, I'm going to turn this right side out and I'm going to go back to the ironing board and press it out and show you the next few steps from the ironing board. Okay, I'm getting ready to turn this right side out. I do want to mention when you go to turn this, when you look inside, remember I talked about this being one unit now inside? You want to put your finger on that pocket piece with the liner and then turn it. Otherwise, you're going to get it inside out on one side. Okay, this is when you really need to bring out that handy ironing dowel. This is actually a muddler. I don't have an ironing dowel, but this does the trick. So what you want to do is open up those seams right on that rolled, that dowel roll, and then give it a quick press. This is an important part. We're going to do some top stitching, so you want to really get those seams nice and open. Okay, working towards the top here, you're going to get to the bridge of the nose, and that's going to get a little tricky, so you want to really open that up and stick the tip of the iron in there. Okay, and that is done. And then once you do the ironing open, you want to also do a quick iron from the right or wrong side. It doesn't really matter. Just get that nice and flat. Okay, so I'm going to point out a quick thing here. When I said to you, you really need to clip in right up to that seam allowance, the reason you want to do that is when you turn it right side out, see how that top of the casing is nice and even with the seam? Same down here. I'm just going to run through it real quick and check all of them, and they all look pretty good. This one actually is probably the only one that's twisting just slightly, but I'm not going to fix it because I can conceal that inside the casing. All right, I'm going to do the top stitching and I'll be back with you, and we'll come back to the ironing station and show you what the final moves are. Back. The top stitching is done. So it's a scant needle's width from the edge at the top and bottom, okay? And then I've already cut my nose grip to about 3 1/4, 3 1/2. You can just figure out what works for you and then cut it accordingly. This is kind of an easy step, but it can be a little bit dangerous because you're going to put it on the machine and you definitely don't want to run that needle through the metal or you'll break a needle. What you're going to do is you're going to slide the metal into the pocket to the inside, and you're just going to place it up at the bridge like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. What you want to do is keep that metal towards the front so it's right on the back side of the main fabric. And you want to really just move that up to the top as best you can. This can be a little bit tricky. It's easy, but it can be tricky to get it in position. Okay, now it's in there, centered. I'm going to go sew that in place, and I'm going to come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, I'm back, and the top stitching is done, and the metal is in position. Looks pretty tidy. I took my time. Remember, I also have my top stitching here, and then the metal is right in here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and make my casings for my elastic. Let me try to position this so you can see it better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 pieces of elastic, 12 inches. We're doing ear loop elastic for the mask. I'm going to just lay that in position, and I already previously ironed where I need to roll those hems in. So I'm going to just go ahead and roll those in on my iron marks and pin those in position. Okay, and those are ready to be top stitched. I like to top stitch with the elastic in position. It just saves me a step and I don't have to feed that elastic through the casing at the end. I've been making a lot of these, and you probably will too. So this just saves me a few steps. The most important thing is, however, when you do that top stitching, you don't want to catch this pocket at all. So make sure you're paying attention to moving that aside as you're sewing, or scooch that over just a bit. But you want to make sure, since this is going to be seen from the right side, that that's nice and neat and it's equidistant on both sides, so you have symmetry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and top stitch that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I just completed the final steps of the mask. I went ahead and top stitched that casing, and you want to get that nice and close to the edge. I just do like a needle's width away, and make sure you don't catch that line, that pocket piece, so make sure that stays open. And I went ahead and I threw some loops onto the elastic so that when I give this to someone, they can just try it on and make any adjustments that they need. You could also go ahead, once you make your adjustment, go ahead and bring it back to the machine, sew it together. I like to do an overlap one end over the other and do some secure stitches, and then put it right in through the casing and conceal it inside. Anyway, let me try it on for you. Here it is. This is a size medium, and frankly, I made this one for my husband in black, and for him it's, I think, a good size. For me, it's a little large, but if I was on a plane, I would feel really good with this mask on. It has great coverage, but I think just for fit, I'm gonna make the size small. Anyway, be safe, everyone, and stay home. Listen to Dr. Fauci. See you soon. Thanks.